Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Thank you, Race Hobbs, for that always impressive introduction, even if I say so. This is Peter Robbins, host of Meanwhile Here on Earth, and we are back as we are every week. I had wanted to do a special show tonight, a discussion with four of the most remarkable women I know, and one of them, Yvonne Smith, unfortunately is not going to be able to be with us tonight. Her dog Bradley had a late appointment with the veterinarian, and we all send Bradley our love and best wishes, but otherwise, no monologue. Let's go right into our introductions. Kathleen Marden's insatiable interest in UFOs and ET contact began in 1961 when her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had a close encounter and a UFO abduction in New Hampshire's White Mountains. As a family member, Kathleen gained firsthand knowledge of Betty and Barney's UFO encounter on the day they arrived home, and 2 days later, she accompanied her parents and siblings on a visit to the Hills' home. Her years of painstaking investigation of the Hills' anomalous events and archival research of their UFO abduction case led her to a career as an author, investigator, and researcher. From 1991 until 2024, she volunteered for the Mutual UFO Network in various positions, such as Director of Field Investigator Training and Founder-Director of MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. Over a 10-year period, Kathleen expanded her team from 3 members to 45 trained, seasoned specialists and attracted PhD and MD psychological and research consultants. In 2012, MUFON recognized Marden's contributions by presenting her with a Researcher of the Year trophy. In 2015, MUFON dedicated its symposium proceedings to her and her team for working tirelessly to help experiencers from around the world get the help they need to cope with the extraordinary events happening to them in their lives, end quote. She is also the recipient of the 2021 International UFO Congress Lifetime Achievement Award. During her years as a UFO investigator and researcher, she worked on 3 studies on nearly 5,000 experiencers of extraterrestrial contact. This was with her research partner, Denise Stoner, and the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters and the Mutual UFO Network. Her compassion for these unfairly targeted innocents led to an alteration in her focus from, boy, that's a big change, from cold investigation to advocacy of the respectful treatment of people who have interacted, willingly or unwillingly, with non-human entities. Kathleen Marden has appeared as an on-camera commentator on dozens of television and video productions. Her film credits are on IMDb. Additionally, she has appeared on countless radio shows and podcasts and has spoken at conferences across the United States and in foreign countries. Her best-selling book with scientific ufologist and lecturer Stanton T. Friedman is Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. The two of them authored 2 additional books, Science Was Wrong and Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. Her book with Denise Stoner, The Alien Abduction Files, includes her investigation of 6 intergenerational cases of ET contact. Her 5th book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, is a comprehensive guide to UFO abduction phenomena and a self-help book for UFO abductees. Her latest book is Forbidden Knowledge, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation. for deeper insight into Kathleen's life history, experiments, and spiritual transformation. Her book, Forbidden Knowledge, and let's see, major research investigator, founder, and director. Yes, it just ends with my typo. Our next guest is Denise Stoner. Her involvement in the field of UFOs spans more than 40 years. She is the co-author, along with Marden, of the Alien Abduction Files, and holds both public and private educational forums and gatherings for abduction experiencers. She has an educational background in business and psychology, and is a certified hypnotist specializing in regressive hypnosis. Denise began her research in hypnosis under Bob Romack, and for the next 5 years worked with him on pain control, smoking cessation, and past life regression research. For 8 years, Stoner worked at the Department of Interior, the National Park Service in Denver, with the Saudi Arabian planning, designing, and overseeing team working on the construction of the first national park in that country, the team winning an award from the Park Service for their work. She then spent 12 years with the U.S. Navy, doing background investigations for new recruits wanting to enter the Naval Power School. Her retirement, if you want to call it that, from the federal government has allowed her to expand her UFO research and investigations. Denise has appeared on TV, including on the Travel Channel, PBS, Weird Florida with Charlie Carlson, and been a guest on many radio shows and podcasts. She is proud to be a part of the MUFON Experiencer research team. She holds the positions of Florida MUFON Field Investigator, STAR Team member, and Assistant State Director of Florida MUFON. Our third guest is Deborah Jordan Cabell. Deb was the center figure in Bud Hopkins' international bestseller, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. In 1992, Hopkins' book was made into a CBS miniseries of the same name. In 1994, she co-authored, along with her sister Kathy Mitchell, Abducted, The Story of the Intruders Continues. In August of 2021, Deb's second book, Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders, was published and is available at most online booksellers, including Amazon. Deb is a former Indiana MUFON investigator. She co-founded her own personal research group, Paranormal Underground, and along with co-founder Greg Cable, co-hosts the Midwest Paratalk Radio, which live streams on YouTube every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Times, and which I am proud to have been their guest on last week. She is also a co-host along with Mary Barrett and RJ DeRoos of Voices of Contact, heard every Friday at 8 on Facebook. She is co-administrator with Beverly Moore of the Zero Midwest Experiencers Facebook page as well. Over the past 30 years, Deb Jordan Cabell has appeared on many TV and radio programs and was a cast member of the documentary The Observers, which is available on Amazon Prime. She has traveled around the country speaking about her experiences at various conferences. She is a retired auto industry worker, cosmetologist, Red Cross volunteer, member of Mensa, wife, mother, grandmother, and new great-grandmother. What did you get married when you were 12? She lives in the Midwest with her husband of 30 years and their 2 Yorkies. Ladies, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. Again, welcome back.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm exhausted. I don't know about you.
I'm just in awe of these 2 ladies and their credentials, and I mean they're so impressive, and I feel
yeah, and you've really been sitting around watching daytime TV and eating chocolate-covered cherries for the past 40 years. Give me a break.
Oh. What about those podcasts?
I often have one guest or 2 guests on, and I thought it was time for a panel discussion. I thought, who? And your names came immediately into my mind. One thing just to kind of get going, in December of 2017. In fact, as I remember, on Sunday, December 17th, the New York Times published a pair of memorable articles. Some credit these two articles with kind of getting us in past the age of ridicule and into this newer, more accepting age of UFO, UAP phenomena, or that they simply were the right articles at the right moment and kind of marked that transition. 2 out of 3 of the reporters that contributed to these articles, Leslie Kane, of course, and Helene Cooper, very distinguished female reporters for the New York Times, and the great Ralph Blumenthal as well. And we've now been clicking along for more than half a dozen years since kind of it hit the fan there. And I'm trying to remember if the voices of any women in terms of the big dialogue going on around, legislature, potential legislature, except for Kirsten Gillibrand, one of my senators who working with her kind of opposite on the opposite side of the aisle, one of your senators, Kathy, Marco Rubio, good example of somebody on the liberal side and somebody on the conservative side working together on this. But women's voices have really not been heard that much in this ongoing dialogue. You think that's just business as usual with guys running the world to the great degree that they do, or your thoughts right off the bat on that? Kathy, can I ask you to begin?
Well, it has always been a male-dominated field. It's now with the testimonies of people in the military or former military officers, intelligence officers, that has always been heavily dominant to the male
Absolutely
side of the population. So, that makes sense to me. I would certainly love to testify myself about my aunt and uncle and about what happened to them, giving sworn testimony. I'm sure that there are many women who are highly qualified, more qualified than me, in terms of military intelligence, but who have had their own experiences. But I would like to see more women involved in this, and, it just might be business as usual.
Denise, your thoughts?
Well, I agree completely with Kathy, but I'd love to see in one of these situations where we actually have a panel like this and the majority of it be women to speak up. That's what I would like to see. And I think perhaps in the future we could convince someone to go ahead with that.
Well, you can always convince me, but I know we're going for a bigger venue. Deb, your thoughts on just generally?
Well, there was the one gal in the congressional hearings, who was a pilot, Alex Dietrich. She was in there. She was testifying.
Yes.
And then of course, Leslie Kane, she's in the fight. And
she sure is.
Boy, I can't think of somebody better to represent us than her. I mean, I was fortunate enough to meet her when Bud was still alive, and what a gal she is. Wow. And so impressive. I was so impressed with her when I met her, just the way she carried herself and the way she talked about stuff, even casually, So we got them going for us. I would like Kathy and Denise, I would love to see, honestly, some maybe women experiencers to testify, or experiencers in general, male or female, that have good solid cases, because I feel like that's the next step. And I think not only do they need to know about us, I think there's some there that maybe want to hear more, hopefully. So
I think You're right. And one of the things that I do want to come back to on our time together here is the overall idea that as the process of disclosure continues as a byproduct of interest in the subject, as opposed to official disclosure where world leaders, make public announcements. In great part, I see that natural process as driven by women at least as much as men. And in trying to find a way to capsulize this program, in promoting it beforehand, I thought, how do I sum up what you all do, what you represent to a lot of us, what activity, defines you in a way. And I thought it's a unique form of public service, simply being a public person about extraordinary events that have happened to you, being comfortable enough in your own skin to not back down, and to make it more acceptable, to make it more comfortable, to make it more natural for people who have had experiences to come forward. Now, you all know better than I. And of course, Kathy, you and Denise have worked for many years, like Yvonne, who can't be here tonight, with people specifically one-on-one. Deb, in a funny way, maybe even without realizing it, you've done the same thing as a public person on a very important incident that's been touched millions of people in terms of readers and viewers. The fact that you're simply out there and, no affect. I don't know if you all realize how important that is. And I guess one of my big questions for our discussion is, how do we make this more acceptable? How do we encourage, with affection and respect, people who are private about this to come forward? And I will say, before I turn the floor back to you all, there was a time that I, and perhaps you, was not very encouraging of experiencers and abductees just putting themselves in the public forum, because you knew the guarantee was they're going to be attacked, they were going to be belittled, they were going to have fun poked at them. And because of the way that the media came down on Whitley Strieber having the courage, as a very well-known writer, to describe his experience, the anal probe became the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, big joke. And I guess that's partly human nature. But at the same time, you are all spokeswomen, so to say, for a rational take on an irrational thing that happens to people. I don't know how else to say it. Denise, you have a background where you have worked in government for many years, obviously not in any way relating to UFOs, but in the world of officialdom. Do you think we're coming, and this is purely subjective, your feelings based on intuition and experience, do you feel that in the world of official governmental affairs that we are moving toward a tipping point of people being willing to take this more seriously, and if they've had an experience, to simply come forward more comfortably about it? Or do they feel they're still risking their jobs or their careers by doing so?
Well, I think that the world and people in it are still resisting and still needing or feeling like they should hide. I mean, I have been kind of snuck across my space here where I live in this subdivision to someone's home in the middle of the night so they could tell me their story, and feeling that no one else would hear. So we start with that, and it runs the gamut to people who are now retired, ready to tell they've been carrying this for over 40 years. And so I think it lands somewhere in the middle between those two.
Kathleen, your experience in that area, or your thoughts off the cuff on this?
Well, I began working with people right along with my Aunt Betty, when I moved back to New Hampshire in the early to mid 1980s. And so it just sort of came naturally in the family. People just needed someone that they could trust, that they could speak with, who would not ridicule them. And I've always believed in maintaining confidentiality. Very, very few of the people that I've ever worked with have gone public with their stories. And I've always warned them about what might and probably would happen if they went public, and told them to have as much evidence, as much ammunition, and as much support as they could possibly garner before they did that. So that's sort of my take on all of this. It still draws ridicule, not as much ridicule as it did years ago, but that may be increasing now.
Yeah. Deb, your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you 40 years ago was a lot different than it is now, but it's still there. And, you know, in the beginning, when our story first came out, we had pseudonyms, and even the place that we lived was a pseudonym. Copley Woods does not exist. And that was because, you know, we had strangers showing up at the house before Intruders was even written. So my family's like, what is going to happen if this book comes out? We didn't even want the book to begin with. And Bud kind of convinced us that it would help people. And it was a family decision. And we said, okay, as long as we could have pseudonyms to protect us, especially the little ones. But, you know, when I wrote the books that I wrote, one with my sister and myself, I felt at that point, okay, if I'm going to tell this story first person myself, I need to own it, or I can't expect anybody to believe me. You know, when I tell them, and I wasn't setting out to make anybody try to believe me. I was just trying to tell my story. I don't have a lot of answers to some things. I was just telling people what I know was fact. And I was fortunate. I was much more fortunate than most people in my position because I had the support of my family, my neighbors, my coworkers, my employer, you know, my friends, because they all experienced things with us, with the family, you know, and with me. And so as I put myself out there more with Bud's prodding, you know, he brought me to conferences and he would kind of like, Daddy, come on up here, hold my hand, and you know, you can tell your story. And I didn't really want to. I almost felt obligated to him because he put so much time and effort and money into my family and helping me. And he helped me so much. I kind of felt like I had to, you know, at some point, but at one point, but after a while, I realized that, you know, for every person out there like me, there's probably 50,000 people out there that's got crazier stories than I'll ever tell, but they'll never tell anyone. And the reason I figured that out was eventually when people around me at work in the factory started to figure out who I was, and I was the UFO lady. I was the ghost hunter lady, the UFO lady, whatever, you know. Nobody, there were a couple of people that might roll their eyes, but then they talked to me like I still had a brain about business stuff. You know, they just avoided talking to me about this stuff. But then there were other people that came up to me and said, hey, and they would look around and they're like, this one time, you know, and then they would tell me things. I know more stuff about the people of Kokomo and I'll never tell. You know, and I felt like I wanted to give back and help people. I wanted to help the stigma. I feel like a tiny little fish in a big sea here. But I mean, I think any little thing that I can do is important in the bigger picture. So, you know, that's why I made myself accessible through my website for the last 30 years to people. Anybody who had my email address, they wanted to share their story with me. I might not have any answers. I don't even have some answers to my own stuff, but I got a really good ear and a great shoulder. And I believe you. and this is a safe place, and you can tell me. And if you don't want it to go anywhere else, it won't.
We all become, if you have any ethics about you and you get yourself involved in this work, you become very good at keeping confidences. It wouldn't occur to us to violate them. It's a sacred trust in a way. And one of the things I've learned over the years, and I see it in the three of you certainly, is the extraordinary value you make available to other people by simply being a good listener. I can't underscore that enough. To know that somebody is actually listening and hearing what you say, as
with no
opposed
judgment.
to, in our culture, it's just a sad fact of an overall communication slowly breaking down, that many people in what they call a conversation are simply waiting to talk. And when this person stops moving their mouth, then I can expound on everything that I'm thinking and all of the wonderful thoughts that they will be so happy to have. It's terrible. And again, the value of just being a good listener, it can't be understated. Now, you have all had decades to think about the experiences that you've had, and more to the point, the intelligences that we're dealing with here. And I should say, for just to give us common ground and for the benefit of viewers and listeners, when we're talking here about the UFO phenomena, UAP phenomena, we're talking about a small slice of the pie. We're talking specifically about UFO phenomena that do represent highly advanced technology, machines, for lack of a better term, that are intelligently controlled by intelligences we can make our educated guesses about if we want, but who do manifest in a real form and who often go by the name in popular culture, generally speaking, of the intelligences we're talking about here, of grays, that most of us agree are the product of laboratories rather than Mr. and Mrs. Gray meet at a social, are attracted to each other, start to date, have a nice gray wedding, and, collect the trousseau. It's probably not like that. And when this first presents to you, this is the shock of your life. And even if they are, in their own hearts and souls, the most beatific, life affirmative, warm and cuddly beings, we are terrified of them because they represent the other. They are the ultimate strange thing in the universe, and there they are in our face. Upon reflection and time passing, that idea that especially the popular culture puts forward, are they good or are they bad? I don't know if that's a valid question in some cases. They're doing what they're doing, as we know, for their own reasons. And so I want to ask the three of you, and start with you, Kathy. Has your general attitude about them transmorphed over the decades? Do you see that we're dealing with a number of thems in the area that you work in? And if so, how do you feel that your perception of them, your thoughts about them, what they're about, have changed since you first became aware of them?
Well, I first became aware of them back in the 1960s. And it was my understanding that they were just like us, only they looked different, completely different. But they were, what I'm saying is that they were people too. And that they were gray in color and, etc. We all know that archetype of the gray. But over time, I've come to have a different understanding, because there are many body types like the grays, but they have different characteristics. Some are grayish white. Some are grayish tan. Some are grayish bluish green. You get all sorts of reports. Some have ears. Some don't have ears. Some have large black eyes. Some have eyes that have yellow with an iris. So there are many variations. And I think that is true of the other, major types that we think of too, like, the reptilians and the mantis types and so on and so forth, that there are variations on those types. In terms of who they are, I used to think Zeta Reticuli, they all come from Zeta Reticuli. I don't believe that any longer. I think that throughout our galaxy and other planets are inhabited, that perhaps they have seeded other planets, particularly those cultures of spacefaring civilizations that have been traveling for a very, very long time, looking for other planets with intelligent life, or other planets where intelligent life might develop. That's different. Some people have tried to convince me that all of these grays are biorobotic, and I can't account for that because so many people think that they are sentient beings, at least the taller ones. They have seen them age. They have seen emotions being expressed by some of them. And so this is very different from that stereotypical.
You're breaking up a little, Kathy.
Little gray.
Denise, I'm going to ask you
frozen.
the same question. And you've worked with Kathy as a research partner, colleague, friend, and you've done your own work as well, and you've had your own experiences as well as your family. Your thoughts regarding that question?
Well, the gray. I've had the same one from the time I first met him. And I was 2.5, and I remembered, and there's a trigger that causes me to remember what he was. And I have watched him age, and I feel attached, as if he were a friend, even though he has never contributed to that friendship other than to guide me on and off crafts. If he touches my forehead, he takes away pain and fear and gets me where I have to go. So I feel like I'm protected by him. And I think that I could pick him out in a lineup of grays.
Wow.
And say that one's mine. And that's who he is. I have seen him during a near-death experience. He showed his face, and that's where I first saw him age. So that and the other couple of entities that I had, they're really different. The scientist, the doctor, just doing what he has to do, and that's the end of it. Get it done. That's their project. So I think everybody falls into a different category. But I feel like the grays, they're not bad people.
Deb?
Well, when I was younger, they definitely scared the crap out of me. They weren't a part of my wheelhouse. They weren't a part of my reality or my world. And I didn't know where to put them. I didn't know where to put myself after the experiences that I started having. And I had a lot of fear. They never did anything to me maliciously. But as I got older and I learned more, I mean, something changed in me, specifically in the June 30th, 83 incident that is the central story of Intruders. Right. That was a change. That was a point in my life where I underwent some kind of profound change, not necessarily not even physically, psychologically, emotionally. And in the first 6-8 months, I really thought I was having a nervous breakdown, and that's when the changes were really happening. And in me, intellectually, spiritually, even. And it was a slow progress. And I remember when I wanted to write, and I wrote a little bit about it in the first book I wrote with my sister. And when Bud read it, Bud was like, he whispered in my ear, don't give them credit for what you did for yourself in your own psyche, in your own soul. And I'm like, I get that. And I accept that and I appreciate that. But something is different. Something in me is different. I don't know how or when it happened. I don't know if it was like a little bomb set to go off at a certain time in my life or something. I don't know. But I lost my fear. And I also had recalled and dream states and times when someone whom I don't know what they look like would say to me, don't be afraid, fear will slow the process, And I wrote it all down. I don't know what it means, but I remember it. And so I began fearful, and I transformed over a period of time honestly, a totally different person. If you met my BFF, me and my BFF have been together for 54 years. And we still talk on the phone every day. And she says, and she's had some strange experiences too. Anybody that's around us long enough usually does. But she said, I wish people knew you, the before and the after, like I did. She goes, because it never ceases to amaze me. You are a completely different person. You even look different physically, but even more importantly are what's going on up in here and in here in my heart. So, and most of my contact's been with the quote unquote grays. I personally feel like there's a whole bunch of different life out there. Yeah. And they all have different agendas, and some maybe are just pretty generic and just doing their thing. And some maybe are a little more benevolent, maybe a little more malevolent. I think there's many, as it look at human beings, look how many of there are, and everybody's got a different agenda. I don't think it's that much different out there. Yeah. And I also feel like at least in my particular case, like even when I saw the thing in the backyard, that small little craft and those little guys, there's no way that 6 of them could get in that and fly across the galaxy anywhere. I don't know what that thing was. We call it a craft before. What else are we going to call it? But I feel like it had some other purpose. Now, I didn't feel that way, 40 years ago. I've come to realize this as I've mulled over things and thought things over, I had these little epiphanies where I realized, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So I've had a whole mess of those over the years too, that have changed to me.
One thing I've observed in my years in the work is we superimpose our fears, our hopes, on certain entities, on certain things, on certain ideas. And there is, and has pretty much from the start, going back to the 1940s, been a group philosophy among some people that follow the work or have experiences that we human beings have messed up our world, our planet, our reality to such an extraordinary degree, and we see it in the news every day, one way or the other, that we simply are incapable of correcting the damage that we have done to this planet. At the same time, it's a longing, it's almost a fairy tale appreciation of these other intelligences, that they are here on some level, or some of them are, I hope, to cure cancer and to have us stop clubbing each other to death over where the line is drawn in the dirt, and make crops bloom in the desert, and bring peace and harmony to the planet, to such a degree that for some people it's like a theology, maybe to a degree going back to the contactee movement in the early 60s, welcome the Space Brothers. I think, longing to have them correct the damage done here environmentally and what have you is a dream. But at the same time, do any of you have thoughts otherwise? Do you feel that there is a potential that they, for lack of a more descriptive term, are trying to help us to help ourselves by your studies, your experience? Kathy, I'll begin with you.
Among the people that I have spoken with who actually have communicated with the non-humans and have a long-term relationship with them, the message seems to be that they're extraordinarily concerned about our failure to do anything about our environment or enough about our environment. They have been concerned dating back into the 1950s about our failure to be good stewards to our environment. Also, our use of nuclear weapons. They're concerned that our spiritual development is out of sync with our technical progress. And when this happens, it could lead to the annihilation of the species. So, but don't hold your breath and think that they're going to walk in and take care of us, that they're going to be our saviors, because they have a policy that allows them to help us quietly. But they're not going to intervene. It is up to us. They will help us. They will give us maybe they might give us guidance. They might go to leaders of various countries, leaders of industry, and take information to them, maybe very, very subtly, maybe while they're sleeping. But that is the way that it will be done. According to all of the experiencers that I have spoken with who have communicated with these ETs, the only time they will intervene if we come to the actual point of destroying our planet, say through nuclear war, then they will attempt to intervene. But some are even opposed to that.
Denise, I know that you share a certain amount of data with Kathleen over the years you've worked together, and you have your own independent information as well. Your thoughts on this question?
Well, I don't think that they're going to come and save us either. I think that they're going to give us information, hand us what we might need to undo our failure to work together and to communicate a need for saving this peaceful planet that is actually an oasis for others that are out there and have a need to come in and use it and enjoy it just like we do. And I also would have to agree with Kathleen when it comes to they're going to stop us when we are going to affect their space and time and what is out there in the universe. And that's going to be nuclear. And I think that's when they might step in.
Before I ask you, Deb, you bring up a very interesting point in terms of newsworthy items. Over the past few weeks, there's been saber rattling among Russian military, and whether or not it's just trying to might makes right, or to get the West to back down. The idea of, I was about to say the Soviets, interesting, the Russians putting nuclear weaponry into space, a bad dream that we can hope does not happen, because if it does, it will be the beginning of others wanting to put nuclear weapons into space. And that way lies madness, to put it mildly. Deb, your thoughts on this question?
Well, I hope they prevent us from completely wiping everything out. But this is just my own feeling. I can only speak for my own self, my own
Please.
experiences, my own opinions, and my own memories. But I feel like I've been told that, or taught that, our thoughts are powerful, and when combined together are really powerful. Like, humans are really powerful beings, and that I don't think they like Kathy said about coming in the dreams. I think that's what they can, like, come to you in your dreams and help you with your thoughts, so you can control them and keep them positive instead of negative. Because when you throw so much negative energy out into the universe, it creates more, negative attracts negative, positive attracts positive. And somebody has been trying to teach me for a long time to control my thoughts and keep them focused in certain positive areas, because that's going to help everything overall and everyone, but, like, I don't think that they're going to come down and say, no, you can't do this, and we're going to do this now or anything. I think there's some out there that really could care less about our planet or us. There's some out there probably think we don't deserve this planet because look what we've done, and why would we want to help them if they can't come onto it on their own and figure it out for themselves, that they don't need it, they don't deserve it, because they'll just wreck it again if we fix it. But then there's others, there's a lot of different things going on out there. But from my own personal experience, someone has been teaching me or training me or telling me or convinced me, and I know it sounds crazy, but that our thoughts are powerful, and we focus our thoughts in a good direction, good things will come.
You remind me, going back 30 odd years and longer, working with Bud Hopkins, Bud would often get accounts from people who were having these experiences, and I know you all have too, of, in so many words, they put a picture in my mind of the earth in a state of ruin and, destruction, whether it was man-made or natural, and pointing out increasing pollution on earth and human irresponsibility. And that has made me feel more committed to wanting to work for an environmental cause or what have you. Bud often felt that was not to be taken at face value, that it was a form of manipulation to get control of a person or change their attitude. I think it's certainly very possible that it was what it seemed to be, that we are introducing these thoughts into your mind to help you become a more responsible person, perhaps more of an activist, perhaps somebody who is more vocal on these bad changes that keep coming at us. But we're doing it for a positive reason, to create, more and more awareness among more people that things are bad and they're getting worse. Denise, your thought on that?
Well, I've had a couple of instances where I was shown through a dream, and it's just a small area. It wasn't the whole earth. It was just a small area that was coming into, well, one of these horrific things were going to happen to that place and that time. And it wasn't too far away. And when I woke up, I felt an extreme need to tell people and to help them understand what we were up against or what we could be up against. So it changes you. something changes you. Yes.
Kathleen?
Well, I think that in the beginning, there was a lot of confusion, that we wondered, why are they showing us these images, these nuclear weapons being exploded?
Yes.
The children at the aerial school who saw the trees all blowing down and war, and most experiencers who have been in contact with the Greys have been shown these images. And so I, for one, used to wonder, are these images of what happened on their planet? Or are these images of what is to come here? Are they warnings for us? Or maybe they could be both. Maybe they're images of what has happened elsewhere, when a planet followed the course that our planet was following. It was never really clear to me. I now think that they're warnings to us, but boy, they just scared the living daylights out of experiencers. They were so shocking. Nothing that children should ever be shown. It's so traumatic. People's faces melting off, people dying, that sort of thing. And, to make it so confusing so that we're not certain whether to believe this or why they're doing this, to me, is sort of a shortcoming on their part. And maybe they don't understand us as well as we think they do. Maybe that's why they're so interested in our emotions and our emotional range. But I simply don't have the answer. I have more questions than answers regarding that.
I think we all do. Deb?
Oh, yeah. Every time I ask a question, I get like 5 more questions. But, it's I had apocalyptic dreams over, I would have 3 nights in a row. And I would have the same dream over a span of like 25 years. And maybe every 4 or 5 years, I'd have this same dream over again. And it was terrifying, apocalyptic like. And I don't know where it came from or why I was having it. But it definitely made an impression on me. It made an impact on me. It terrified me. But then it angered me. And then I felt, as I got older, I felt my emotions changed to, well, this can change. It doesn't have to be this way. I got trapped in this is coming, this is what's going to happen thing for a long time. And then suddenly something flipped in me and I'm like, maybe not necessarily, So I don't know if that was a narrative being changed in my head externally, or I was doing it to myself psychologically. But I always felt like Bud was a little more dark. And then as I lightened up, I say, he was like the good father and patted me on the back, but I could tell he wanted to roll his eyes a couple of times when I told him things. God love him. But somebody made this comment one time about him that it's really true. He was in the emergency room of this entire phenomenon. Yes. He saw the people like me who were just disaster areas, totally wrecked.
Perfectly stated.
And he's a human being and he's compassionate as hell. And it had to have had an effect on him. So I often wondered if that was why he kind of slanted that direction a little bit more so than I did, I didn't have any effect on his spectacular work at all, or the fact that he saved my life. But seeing people, if you could have seen me in 1983, you know what I'm talking about. So, like I said before, I just hope that we all whatever is out there is going to give us the tools that we need so that we can help ourselves.
Amen to that, and a perfect place to take our break. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and I'm joined by Kathleen Marden, Denise Stoner, Deb Jordan Cabell, three women I am absolutely crazy about, and I'm very happy to be spending this time with. We'll see you in 4 minutes.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com. Unlock the mysteries of the spirit realm with the new book, Meeting Wallace. In this channeled work by renowned psychic medium Larry Costa, the reader will delve into the profound wisdom of his spirit guide, Wallace. Together, they share the transformative journey of harnessing psychic powers from the celestial plane. Discover the extraordinary psychic gifts that have empowered Larry on his path, and immerse yourself in a thought-provoking and awe-inspiring read. Meeting Wallace is a groundbreaking endeavor, and it is a perspective seen through the eyes of a spirit guide. Discover the wisdom of the spirit realm alongside actual photographs of ghosts and spirit guides. Get the book Meeting Wallace by Larry Costa at Amazon.com.
And we're back with Meanwhile Here on Earth, your host, Peter Robbins, and my special guests tonight, Kathleen Marden, Denise Stoner, and Deb Jordan Cabell. I ended this past section by saying I'm crazy about these three women. More, though, to the point, I love, respect, and admire these three women. They are dear friends, esteemed colleagues, and in terms of experience, an almost invaluable resource in this work. Before we continue on line of thinking that we're going on, a question from our chat room. Have any of you ever had a man in black experience, or been threatened in one way or another to keep quiet by any body representing a government or military agency? And if so, how did you respond? Kathy, you first.
I have been threatened on several occasions. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was a military or a government agency or bullies or skeptics or who it was at these different times. How did I respond? Well, it depends upon the situation. The first time I responded by reporting it, making a lengthy police report. The second time that it occurred, I reported it to the police again, and this was threats that were coming in over the telephone. And so the police gave me a special number that I could push on my phone, and they would locate that individual and Baker Act him.
Wow.
And I had always told myself that if it happened again, I was going to record it and have all of the evidence there before I had the people arrested. But I forgot to do that the last time it happened. But I will not be intimidated. They can threaten whatever they want. I've lived a good life. I tell people that this has happened. So if I turn up dead, go and find out who did it, because I'm not going to commit suicide. And, what I do is try to get as much evidence as possible and report it to the authorities.
Denise?
Yes. When Kathleen and I wrote the book, we had some things that went on when we were working with radio hosts. And it ended up that I had no phone. So I had to call and have my lines all rerun. And in the process, the supervisor located a bundle of DoD wiring. And as I told him, don't take it out, leave it there. I suspect it's still there. What it's doing, watching everything I've been doing. And as far as the Men in Black, yes. My mom and I, we were in a store on Christmas Eve. We were shown two women with two babies, but they weren't human. Great big eyes and just blankets. All you could see was the head. The women were identical twins with the great big eyes. We were in line with the last two people in the store for the evening, and they had frozen them all except for my mother and I. So I followed them. They disappeared. There was only one way out, and we could see that door from where we were standing. When we left, my mom crossed to the car, and I heard a sound, and I turned around, and there were three men leaning against the wall wearing black suits, black hats, and briefcases. And one signaled me to come over, and I did. And he said, "What you were shown just now, the story should never be repeated." So I went to the car, and it was right there. We were parked in a handicapped space. So I turned around to look, and the men were gone. There was only one place to go, and that was over where we were. down the sidewalk and I would have seen them.
Mm.
So that's one of my experiences with Men in Black.
Denise, was this at a time when you were employed by the Navy, i.e. the Department of Defense?
Yes. Yeah, it was before my retirement. And they did not like what I was doing either. They knew, but they said, you don't need to be doing that. And they would just hint that it wasn't a good idea. So, yeah.
But you kept your job nonetheless.
I did. They couldn't grasp what I was doing. They didn't like what I was doing, but they had no reason to get rid of me. I did my job and then some.
So interesting. Deb, did you ever have an experience where you were threatened?
Not. I've had a couple experiences with Men in Black, I guess, but I never was threatened by them. One knocked on my door. This was after Intruders was published. Somebody knocked on my door one day, and this was back when you could still answer your door. And I opened the door. It's a nice young man in a dark suit and tie, and very crisp and businesslike. And I knew he was lying the minute he opened his mouth, because he said, he asked me what my name was. He asked me my name, and I said, yeah, that's me. And he says, I got your address from Bud Hopkins. And I thought, no, you didn't. Because there's no way on the planet that Bud would ever do that. And he goes, I just had a question I needed to ask you. Would you mind answering me? And I'm like, sure. What do you want to know? And it was one question about the phone calls that I got during my pregnancy with my youngest son. Remember when I got a phone call every Wednesday at like 2 p.m, and it was bizarre chatter in some language and weird. And he wanted to know what the background sounded like. And I said, it sounded like a factory. It sounded like like a factory work and stuff. And he's like, okay, thank you. And he got in his car and left. And I'm like, okay, what was that? And I actually called Bud, and he's like, of course I didn't give anybody. He says, why did you answer the door? I'm like, I answer the door for everybody, But he didn't threaten me. He was very kind, and he asked me one question, and I'm like, I'll tell anybody anything they want to know. I'll answer questions. I don't care. And then when before Intruders was written, we weren't even home. And but the mark was there still in the yard. And we got home. Mom and I had been out, and we got home, and the neighbor next door called my mom, and she's like, I just wanted you to know that a man in a dark sedan pulled up in your side driveway. He got out of your car. He was wearing a black suit and tie. And I think she said he was wearing a hat, but I can't remember. He was carrying a briefcase, but it was really big. And she goes, he went to that place out in your backyard. And of course, my dad had shown all the neighbors at that point. She said he went to that spot in your backyard and took some stuff from the spot, and then got in the car and left. And she goes, were you expecting someone? And we're like, no, we weren't. So, he was technically a man in black, and he drove a black sedan, but we never encountered him, So, and of course we had the black helicopters. I don't know what earth that was. Surely that's not anybody like following you, or if an intimidation maybe, but not spy on you. And after a while, I just started flipping them off every time I see them. They were close enough that I could see them, so they could see me, because I felt helpless. The first few times it happened, I called Grissom Air Force Base, and I described it to them, and they're like, that we don't have those. That's the thing. I'm like, yeah, it is a thing. I have pictures of it. And she didn't have me. So that was a waste of time.
Now, we can only speculate on what goes on behind the scenes. There was a time, of course, before 2017, or starting about then, when, again, ridicule reigned. And it was easy enough to dish on people that were public in the field, or to belittle their alleged experiences. it always occurred to me that there was infighting going on from the start of this phenomena, that had Harry Truman, for example, been encouraged by the team of people that he surrounded himself with to advise him on Roswell, imagine how different the world would have been. And say 1948, if the President of the United States had gone on the radio and said, "My fellow Americans, and by extension citizens of the world, it is my solemn duty to inform you that," and just let it drop right then and there and let history sort it out. I think perhaps the biggest error, if one could see it that way, and again, even as I'm saying it to myself, there are a lot of reasons that secrets should be kept, but that how differently the world would have evolved if this was acknowledged back then. We have created the ultimate national security state, and a place where up is down, down is up, where reality, if it's too extreme, is belittled or made fun of. And I'm just kind of playing here in a sense, but it really all began with, I think, male egos, that we cannot admit that there is an entity out there or entities that can fly circles around us, that has technology that dwarfs us, that makes us highest ranking military and intelligence people coming out of World War II, where America was to a degree what we all wish it was now. We had helped destroy fascism in Europe, and we're assisting our enemies in rebuilding worthy societies. I'm not exactly sure the question I have here, but how different things would have evolved if maybe there were women involved in some of these decisions. It's a cliche to say, well, you're more nurturing by nature because you can give birth and men can't. And at the same time, here I am talking to three women who have devoted a good part of their lives to being there for other people. On this subject, I'm not sure if I could put together a similar pattern of men who are doing the same thing with their lives without quite a bit more searching. Kathleen, your thoughts on this rambling?
As a nurturing mother, I have always felt sort of cautionary about letting the public know too much information too quickly.
Thank you.
That I fear that it would cause public hysteria.
Yes.
And I think that it has to be done as it is unfolding over a long period of time. And I think that the day will come when we will realize that those who might be here to harm us are being controlled by those who are here for our benefit, and that the public will know. But still, I proceed cautiously.
I'm going to jump in here rather than turn it over immediately to Denise and Deb. You really touched a nerve for me there. And for some decades, certainly going back to when I was working with Bud, that question keeps restating itself for me. How does one responsibly put all this information in the public forum without freaking the hell out of everybody who is not prepared for it? I think, you go to a UFO conference, you get the illusion that everybody is ready, that society is ready for these kinds of announcements to be made. Well, most of the people at that conference are, or the people that we work with professionally are. They've thought about it for years, if not decades. But it's one thing to say we're not alone. There are other intelligences in the universe, the cosmos, that do come and go with impunity. They visit us. And that's a big enough announcement to command headlines for weeks and change, the culture to a degree. But then how do you not say, oh, by the way, there are these awkward little other things. We'll call them hybrids, beings that are part us, part them, which does bring up that pesky subject of missing pregnancies and taking ovum and sperm from people, and people who are brought together as children in neutral spaces to be observed. How do you dig half a hole? How do you let out some information, allow people to accustomize themselves to it, or get used to it in some way, if that's ever possible, and then restage the more extreme sounding or exotic sounding information? Denise.
Oh boy.
If there is a way.
That's very, very difficult. Again, I'm a mom. My daughter was born with cerebral palsy. I've had to be very cautious with her all her life. I'm hoping that I'm leaving her with a way to survive when I'm not here any longer. But, we've put a Band-Aid on this thing for so many years. That's what moms tend to do. Should we tear it off now and it's still bleeding? We've got a huge mess on our hands. So that's something that I wouldn't do. But I would find a way to very truthfully and very cautiously add a little bit at a time until everybody can see what the picture is. I do not believe in shoot them down, can't ask them any questions. So,
Deb?
Well, it's kind of what I'm trying to do by being out there as a person in my position, that I'm not a professional anything other than a factory worker or a hairdresser, but I've had these experiences, and so I'm trying to be out there talking about them, and just being there for somebody. And if somebody wants to talk about it, I'm like, here, take my hand, hold my hand. They can laugh at me. I'm here with you, and then we'll be stronger together. And I agree with Kathleen, we just can't throw all this at everybody at once, but we got to start somewhere or it's never going to happen. And that's what I'm trying to do when I speak publicly, do things like this. When I participated in that Observer documentary, and I did very few of these things because I'm not comfortable on that big stage like that. It has nothing to do with the subject matter. I've always been very self-conscious, anyway. But when the producer who was interviewing me asked me if there was one thing I wanted to leave with the viewers, the last words I wanted to leave with the viewers. And I had literally got on my knees and prayed the night before this filming, whatever the universe, whatever you want to come out of my mouth, please use me and make me say the right words so I don't sound like an idiot, And when he said that to me, it came in my head. Don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid. That doesn't mean be dumb. That doesn't mean don't pay attention, but don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And I'm here to show people I've been through this from the time I was 6, and I'm 65 years old now, and I'm still here. I'm still standing. I've had weird stuff happen to me, but I'm here. I'm okay. So, you will be too. We'll get through this together.
This is purely speculation, but obviously based on a great deal of thinking, experience, shared information, your own experiences. There is a model in science fiction that I don't find in the world of science or UFO studies, and occasionally, especially in dealing with the UFO phenomena, UAPs, there is no model to proceed with. But the great Gene Roddenberry, the man behind Star Trek, and not just a good science fiction writer, but at times a bit of a visionary. One of the constructs for the series was the idea of a prime directive, that if you are out in space exploring and you find yet one more planet with humanoid type people who are slightly different, maybe black on the white, white on the left, or magenta in color, but many of them always seem to be humanoid, that if they're primitive, or more primitive than you are, you never show them the full sweep of your technology because their culture would disintegrate. And there is an interesting model for that in real anthropology when colonials, British, French, whomever, went into Africa and for that first time interfaced with the native population. They were perceived at times, and we see it, replicated all over the world as Europeans pushed into countries that they subjugated for years. That are you ghosts? Are you spirits of the future? Are you gods? Are you devils? And to introduce too much information too soon would make a culture collapse. Do you think, purely independent thought, that there's any situation, if it occurred, that might cause them to actually reveal themselves and to, we're here and we feel compelled to act now because you have done X, so we have to do Y. Can you imagine a situation like that, Deb?
Well, yeah, if we start dropping nukes all over the place. During a memory I had, or a lucid dream, or whatever you want to call it, I was told that not only would that wreck the planet, but it would reverberate like a pebble in the pond, and it would affect different layers of space and time, if it was big enough. And that was not something anybody else wanted either. So,
yeah. Denise?
Well, one of the things that I was shown, and I don't know that I can tell the absolute fact about it, but what I saw was 3 missiles over Epcot. And I felt compelled to go there, to stand in that exact spot, look up at the sky, and try to, with a great deal of wonder, what is that about? But they were not moving. They were still. They were neither going up or down or blowing up, but I felt that they were extremely dangerous and that this is the time when those entities that we know would actually put a stop to that type of thing when it became nuclear.
Kathleen?
I foresee that at some point in the future, if mankind can mature and become more benevolent, protocols could be set up where there would be a gradual introduction of an ET species, maybe at the United Nations or something like that. I think that is possible, perhaps unlikely, but a possibility. Or as Deb said, we start dropping nukes on each other. I think they'll show up. Otherwise, the idea that they would come and show themselves over major cities of the world all at once in large numbers, they say that we would perceive them as the enemy, and that it would have dire consequences for us if we started firing at them.
I think that's very fair to say. And you remind me that during the Truman administration, again, this had a macho perception of the world that real men shoot first and ask questions later. The idea that there's a standing order to try to shoot these down. And we're talking, of course, about the golden age of the Cold War. And as somebody that...
You're muted. Denise both like...
Films of the 1950s in science fiction were allegories for creeping communism and, groupthink, the hive mind, the collective work of godless species as opposed to human beings infused with the soul and, having a real sense of values. Um, the How can I say, to a surgeon, surgery is what you're going to do. As they say, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you are the military, you are still going to be, no matter what intelligence is coming in about more beatific aspects of alleged intelligences, you are going to be thinking strategically. And it's part of the nature, I would say, of man. I don't know if it extends to mankind per se, but there is a struggle in the House of Representatives going on and off now, drawing a number of people who have become personalities in popular culture because of their status as whistleblowers or sources of seemingly credible information. How do you think there's any solution or any way that this entrenched attitude of we can't just trust the universe and love them because they could be like Mars attacks bad aliens. Um, we can't take a chance. Is that something you see more as rooted in the world of being guys and in the military, or some human thing that we have to work out a way to get beyond? Kathleen.
I think that as humans, we always fear the unknown, and that the very important thing is to learn as much as we can about that unknown and realize how long they have been here, and that if they had wanted to conquer us, to enslave us, or to supplant us, they could have easily done that much earlier.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. That's exactly what I was going to say.
The kind of how can I say, the narrative arc of all of your lives in terms of looking at your experiences, having an attitude change or a philosophic change. I'm thinking of the very famous and well-documented experience of Travis Walton and his being taken in 1975. We all know the story. Travis's initial reactions were, to put it mildly, this was not a positive experience. He and the men with him, I think, tended to see them not necessarily as good or as doing anything productive. But over time, we all, and Travis is much or more than anybody I know myself, had kind of independent transitions in our attitudes or potential attitudes of what had happened, namely that this craft that he encountered, and that was cheerfully reckless enough to get out of the vehicle and, hunch nearby, reacted. It simply reacted when he jumped up, and it may have stopped his heart or created another health crisis. And that the reason he was taken, because he certainly, that we know of, had no history of this, and usually is accompanied by a history, was to correct the damage that had been done until his body was stable and release him again. Is that fair to say that that idea has informed your attitudes about these other intelligences, or you think that that's kind of an isolated situation? Denise, you first.
Boy, I never really had a feeling of being attacked or threatened. Matter of fact, I had one that I am positive saved my life when I was dying and was given a 20% chance to live. So I take that, and then my work with the military, and they ran these little war rooms where they could push their little tanks around on a big table. Now we've got Homeland Security, and they're there to preserve the planet and life. so I can look at both sides, I still come out at the end of we need to find a way to mutually or together invite these individuals into our lives and on our planet.
Kathleen?
That is difficult for me. It is, I did believe, in fact, many, many years ago, after Travis had his experience, Dr. James Harder was in my Aunt Betty's living room, and I was there as well. And we were discussing what had happened to Travis. And Dr. Harder came up with the idea that perhaps Travis was taken aboard in order to save his life. Perhaps he had actually been killed and that they had taken him aboard to revive him. I've thought about that. I know that they have healed many, many experiencers, some who haven't asked for healing and some who had asked and whose requests were granted. At the same time, just as many experiencers have developed physiological ailments as a result of their experiences of having the implants placed nasally, of vaginal problems, gynecological problems, developing chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome at a rate that is many, many times above the average rate. Just phenomenal. Of headaches, migraine headaches, nosebleeds, all sorts of things that experiencers have happen as a result of this. But at the same time, people are healed. People are healed of cancer. There's evidence of this in one of the cases that I investigated, where the experiencer was diagnosed with cancer. And I said to him, ask these ETs, just send them telepathic messages asking for healing. And he was one who could sense ETs or orbs coming into his environment, and he was capturing them on video. A couple of weeks later received a video of an orb. It was a beautiful blue orb that flew across the room. And
Okay, you've frozen again, Kath.
Oh
It's
boy.
like every time she starts telling us some
Yes.
fascinating, interesting thing, she
Yep.
freezes again.
not foresee.
It's good to have somebody to blame. The reality of these other intelligences as part of the world around us, most folks are not keeping them at the center of their thoughts. I think it's fair to say most people trying to live a decent life are doing their best to pay their bills, to hope their kids turn out okay, that they don't live in a toxic environment, that there is social security and medical assistance for them when they need it, that when they're retired, they can enjoy with the time they have left. They do not think about the reality of these other intelligences, why they're here, and what they're about, and the implications for humanity. Again, how with compassion, with empathy, with kindness is the best way to assist folks in normalizing their relationship with this idea. And I'll predicate it by saying one other thing. None of us know statistically how many people are taken. go through the archetypical abduction experience. And we all, the four of us, have our own ideas on it that we come to by the work we've done, the conversations we've had. For me, statistically, I think the percentage of people that are taken is far higher than most folks, myself included, would be comfortable really knowing if we could. And to say that, and I'll just say it, that at the least, I think unless you've been living a very quiet life in a very small hamlet in a very remote area, every one of us knows someone who has had this happen. And it's the center of their secret life, or it's something that they've shared with one or two people. But do you all have, in your thoughts, have an idea statistically of how many people are affected by this? Again, it would be subterranean in a sense, because most people are not actively talking about their being taken experiences. But even if we all know one person, and I think it's more than that for many of us, certainly, even if we're not involved in the work, it's still a large number. Any educated guesses or intuitions on that, Deb?
I was going to ask the other two ladies. You and I have had this conversation before, Peter. I think there's millions of people out there like this, millions. But that's my opinion. But I almost, if I can see it in someone, when I meet new people, or I'm in a group of people, and it doesn't have to be at a conference where everybody's, you're there for a reason, you're interested in it for whatever reason. But even like in my factory, and I meet people and make friends, there's just something built in me instinctively to listen to how somebody talks and talks about other things in life and everything. And if I get to look them in the eye a couple good times, it's like, I recognize something in you that's in me. You know what I mean? And it's never failed me. I've always felt, before I was more public talking about it in public, and I was very guarded, because people are crazy and mean, and I don't care anymore, but I always I could get a feel for someone, and I could tell who I could talk to. I just knew they would get it, and they did. I mean, Kathleen and Denise, do you know what I'm talking about? That feeling you get when you meet people, and that look in their eye, you see it, that they've been touched by this in some way. You just know.
Absolutely. And occasionally, and especially when I had a greater connection to the others, when I encountered an experiencer, I actually felt that electrical tingling in my body, and they did as well.
Yeah, I felt that before. Yeah. Bud would be like, okay. I loved him so much.
I don't think a day goes by that I don't not miss him, that I don't miss him. The way it is with people that we love that are gone, but have left a very large presence with us to move forward. You had said something before, Deb, that's worth repeating, that Bud kind of ran that part of his life like an ER. He was an agnostic, if not an atheist. He saw his immortality as being with his daughter and granddaughter, in the friendships that he made, in the works that he produced creatively, books, paintings, in living a good life, so to say. But he, how can I say, he was a humanist. If he had a religion, it was that. And his objective interest in the overall subject was secondary to there are people that need somebody to talk to who are not having a pleasant time of this. And I think it resulted partly in a myth that he only was looking for, had an agenda, that these aliens are bad and needed to prove it, the same way that a myth emerged that Dr. John Mack thought all aliens were wonderful, benevolent entities. John recognized as a psychiatrist the trauma, but his genuine interest was in instances where people had been touched in a positive way, or what we could learn that was positive about these experiences, which are very different than they're bad or they're good, and I'm going to respond accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
The same way, like you had said also with people, Bud had a picture up in his studio. I think it was like a Chinese woman who was 100 years old and a Swedish girl who was 3 years old, and said, these are both human beings. The idea being that, look at us here on Earth, how different we are. And I'm just starting to ramble here a bit, but as we continue in this era of disclosure happening as a byproduct of information coming up, more and more people, generally speaking, knowing that they're not going to be judged for having an interest in this subject, more and more people care less and less every year what other people think about, what they think about this subject. Is there any way that people in our positions, working locally, working one-on-one as we do, in terms of friendships, business relationships, family, anything that we can do that maybe we're not doing to assist this process in continuing along in its own way? Denise?
Boy, that's a question. I think that what I've found is if I go to a gathering and none of these people have been taken or had an experience as far as I know, and then you start to mention it to someone who's interested in the topic, and more people come forward and say, something happened to me. Something that I could not explain. I've been fearful of for many, many years. Can I talk to you? And when the gathering comes together in that type of unit, and they're all listening to each other, more and more of that is going to help. Just my sense of what to do, because we can't call the world and announce like we've discussed tonight, but we can on a small scale, and that way find out how many. And it could be as many as 1 in 3. If I stop and think about how many people I have been with in a room that didn't know anything about the topic, and then all of a sudden they do, and they start talking. So let that grow and let that be what it should. And I think it'll help everyone.
Deb, your thoughts on that?
Networking and connecting is key. 40 years ago, I was in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. We didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. I did everything through snail mail and an occasionally well-planned 3-minute long distance phone call after 6 p.m. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now we have the internet. Now we have Facebook. Now we have these multiple platforms, Zoom, StreamYard, the things we're doing now. When I was in Indiana 40 years ago, I was completely alone and I had no one to talk to. Sometimes I could go months and maybe years without talking about any of this to anyone. But that's changed. And we need more of that, the connection. That's why I got involved with CERO's Midwest group for the folks around here, just to have connection. Because there's strength in numbers, and there's strength in numbers. There's confidence in numbers. There's power in numbers. When you know You know, I wish I would have known 40 years ago how many people really were out there like me. I did not know. But once I learned and once I started to discover that, you know, I felt every time I went to a conference, you know, I would come home and I would feel energized. I would feel, you know, motivated for like a couple weeks. I'd be like, yeah, I know my focus and I know and then, you know, it would peter away after a while. You know, that's kind of with the connecting here is making a difference. And that's what we have to continue to do. And we have to grow that. And I think that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Kathleen?
You made some excellent points, Deb, that I had thought of as well. So thank you for mentioning those. There are also far more support groups, online support groups, than we've ever had, and workshops. And that's an excellent opportunity for people who are seeking help to speak with other people who have shared the same experiences, with whom they can have a supportive relationship, talk with one another one-on-one. Zero is one, Opus is another. MUFON's ERT has a list of online support groups if you contact them. So there are various places that you can go to for information, and so many more shows. But to me, as an experiencer, the most important thing is to have a few close friends who are also experiencers that you can reach out to immediately, with whom you have an intimate relationship, where you can share information that you would never tell anyone else.
Well said. That brings up a question for me that something happened, has happened to me a number of times in my life, and I'm wondering if it's happened to you. That somebody that I know in a completely other area of my life, be it business, family, or an old friendship, asks me if they can talk to me about something, and it becomes a description of their best memories of a bedroom visitation, of an abduction, or a contact experience. And you know, from what they're saying and the way that they're telling you, that they're getting it out for the first time, and they trust you enough to be the recipient of the information. However, as we know in life, expansion and contraction, one always follows the other. It's just a natural law. And sometimes expanding to the point where I'm going to share this, there is an emotional contraction. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I told them that. And they come back to you at a later date and say, you know, what I told you the other day or last week or over that drink, I've been really thinking about that. And, you know, I've been so into science fiction since I was a kid. And I think it may be a presenting sign for some trauma that I had when I was young. And you hear them go through the process of trying to not talk themselves out of it, but in so many words tell you that they were completely mistaken, when you know as well as you can that no, they just are freaked out that they shared this with you, and they hope that you will accept their excuse, which I've never found myself doing. Of course, I've never referred to it again. Is that an experience that you have had? Deb, you first?
No, I can't say that I have.
Okay.
Honestly, most people that come and tell me stuff, that ship's already sailed at that point. Because I guess maybe it's because it's me, you know, I don't know. They know my weird stuff. So, but.
Okay. Denise, is that something that's ever happened to you?
Not to that degree, but I have had people say, I've gotten really busy. I don't think I want to look at this just now because I need to devote more time to it. I'll get back to you. And I
Okay.
never hear from them again. So they do it that way.
Kathleen?
I think that when I was an investigator and I was going to have to pass a case disposition, that they might have been more apprehensive. But I wasn't an investigator for a long period of time. I was more compassionate. I realized only they could determine whether or not they had had this experience.
Oh.
I don't live in their bodies. And I would tell them that. I would say, how could I possibly know? Even when you have physical evidence, how could I know? I don't live in your body. and I taught them how to look for evidence, how to keep a diary, how to check their bodies after an experience, how to document everything they remembered, the date, the time, the missing time. And even if they wanted to set up cameras, that sort of thing. And then finally, there would be people who would say, you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but. And I just say, no, I won't think you're crazy. Why would you think that? And, so, I think that over time, I've built a reputation for trust and for confidentiality.
Yes.
So people don't backpedal any longer.
I think the three of you have built that same kind of reputation. We're into our last 5 minutes. Any thoughts in summing up, advice or philosophy, or just anything you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners before we move on? Deb, can I start with you?
Well, just keep on keeping on. I mean, we're all in this together, and we just try to stay positive and stay connected. And I don't know. I could ramble for a long time.
It's kind of a goofy question in a way.
Kind of biting my tongue. I don't want to eat up all the time.
Denise?
Boy, yeah, what Debbie said. It's a difficult thing. You have to live with it. You have to want to help people. You have to be prepared, because look at me, I'm in my 70s, and I've dealt with this since age 2.5, but it's helped me to grow and to learn about people and others, including the entities. And I don't look at it in a negative way at all.
Kathleen?
Well, I would like to give advice, and that advice is search for the answers, explore, experiment using scientific methodology. Do not be intimidated. Do not feel that you have to be grounded in the past. Be brave, step forward, and discover.
And know you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think back on all of the extraordinary people that I've met, because my life went off in this direction. Not that I wouldn't have met extraordinary people in other ways, but how fortunate, as a byproduct of my curiosity and my sister's experience, which obsessed me for so many years. What happened to her? Where was she taken? Who took her? The question you ask yourselves, that, again, a byproduct has been, I have some of the greatest friends in the world. I have met and loved some of the most interesting people imaginable, all of whom have courage, imagination, curiosity, and in a way are adventurers in a future that we can only guess at. and hopefully it will be positive. Although, what a crazy time we're in right now.
Peter Robbins, may your producer step in here. I want to say something that I was going to hold for off the air after the show, but I probably won't have time to say it then because I'll have to leave so quickly.
Please do.
I've been producing these shows for north of 15 years. I've been in this subject of UFOs and all of the surrounding everythings that go with it for over 30. Tonight, I just want you to know that I am enlightened every time that I sit down and listen to a group of wonderful individuals like the four of you. All of you sitting here have been in this when you were youthful and young and had all of this energy and all of this, I'm going to go out here and get this. We're going to solve this. And now here we are as sort of the older patriarchs and the elders of this craziness that we have been in all these years. And to see how you have all grown and to see your perspectives and your energy, just like it was then, I am just honored. I'm honored to be in this position I'm in, to know you by your first names, to love you and champion all of you. Thank you all for everything you've done. There's no award beautiful enough for everything you've done for people like me and everybody in the chat room and everybody watching live and everybody that's going to be watching this for years to come in podcast form. So thank you all, ladies. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you, Peter Robbins, for being my brother. And it was just a wonderful time getting to sit back here and listen to every word y'all have to say, because it's a hard world out there for women and in every aspect, and always has been. And y'all are hard as granite. Y'all come with it. You have these backbones that people need to know, you know, and the intelligence and the wherewithal to know and learn. And you don't have those closed minds. Your minds are open, but not so open your brains fall out. But you are welcoming new energies, new technologies, new opinions, and new insights from everybody. I could go on and on. But I just wanted to say that on air so that this is included in the show. I love you all, and thank you so much for everything you've done since the moment you've had your experiences and the moment you stepped into the ring and started, throwing down on this, because you've done a wonderful job and you're the best we have.
Thank you, Race.
Oh, thank you.
Peter Robbins here with my special guests, Kathleen Marden, Denise Stoner, Deb Jordan Cabell. Meanwhile, here on Earth, we'll see you next week.